My first romantic disaster taught me the most important lesson about love. I married a guy who exceeds anything the teenage version of myself could have drawn up. It is a mild day for the middle of winter and a lazy drizzle is falling over the ice rink in Central Park. Strands of white bulbs twinkle in the mist while the magical glow of the city casts us all in a gentle, gauzy light. It is the stuff of fairy tales, but for me, the night is not destined for a happy ending. I have just lost my first love to another girl. I watch them as they skate around the rink, and even though I'm flanked by my 3 closest friends, I feel alone. We met when I was 16. He was the pastor's son, a guitar player with dark, curly hair. Dark, curly hair at a time when Josh Groban was pretty much everything in my world. So you really can't blame me. To be fair, beyond being cute, he was also very sweet, and most importantly, he noticed the nerdy bookish girl in the corner. Me. Our church youth group consisted of about 50 kids, just large enough that we could be around each other without actually interacting for a while. Then, as they do in the dizzying years of teenage dynamics, things shifted. Suddenly, his attention was on me. The story of our growing interest in each other is a montage with only a few scenes. There is the bonfire in the church parking lot on a cool autumn night, where we stood apart from the crowd and felt our way through the small talk that comes in those early days of flirtation. I can close my eyes and feel that night, the heat of the fire pushing against the chill in the air, the shouts and laughter of the crowd far in the backdrop of our conversation. The sense that something I had only read about in books was finally, at last, happening to me. Then there was my birthday, when he showed up at my job to give me a gift, Hilary Duff's latest CD. I worked at an after-school program, and in the midst of the boisterous playground games, the kids had paused to whisper and giggle at the fact that Miss Nicole had received a visit and a gift from a boy. I had shushed them with mature authority until I was finished for the day and could get on the phone with a friend to whisper and giggle about it myself. Then his birthday party, where the whole group played hide and seek in his wooded backyard. It was November, at that point of transition where you haven't quite given into a winter coat, but you're freezing in your long sleeves when dusk sets in. That was the night he took my hand to help me climb over something. A fallen tree? A rock? The details have faded with time. Anyway, he would probably protest this whole story, because I'm sure he was just being polite, but for a girl who had never had her hand held by a guy, it was pretty major. There was, with it, a realization that cool November nights were better if there was a boy around to hold your hand. Snippets, tiny pieces of memories. And so few. Because the truth is, his interest in me only lasted for a couple of months. At its height, there were those memories, plus phone calls and shy conversations, and absolutely no physical contact. Then, abruptly, everything stopped. No calls, and at church, no conversation. I didn't know what to make of it and certainly didn't know how to approach him about it. So I watched and waited, feeling worried and already approaching heartbreak, but, and oh, this makes me so sad for my younger self, still hopeful. First love. Before it, you are content to live on your own, ignorant of the idea that there is any other way. Then there is this whisper of something, a faint idea that there is something more, that it involves linking yourself with someone else, and that, in this grown-up world, that something is called love. Things had cooled to chilly silence by the time Christmas approached, and when our youth group went ice skating, I signed up to go with friends. I knew he would be there, and my youthful optimism allowed me to believe that maybe things would take a turn back in the right direction. Maybe that night we would get back on track. But then the one thing happened that tells every teenager where they stand: the couples skate. People weaved in and out of the crowd, and when the music started, I was where I always had been, standing off to the side, and he was out on the ice. It was an old girlfriend and they were back together. I never did find out if there was anything more to the story than that. I wondered for a long time if I had made some type of mistake with him, if there had been a misunderstanding that had escaped me. But I never knew what happened for sure. Now none of that matters. I can hear my husband downstairs, explaining who Michael Jackson is to our 2 kids. He's playing them the music video from Free Willy because they are currently obsessed with Orcus. I married a guy who exceeds anything the teenage version of myself could have drawn up. Back then, I didn't know that the whisper of first love was just an introduction to the concept. I couldn't even conceive of a man who would love me enough to take on infant night feedings, to empty dishwashers, and have patient conversations and share inside jokes. I thought I had found love at 18, but I didn't even know what I was looking for. I've walked past that rink in the park many times in the years since my first experience with love. And even though I've moved on, it all comes back to me in that spot. I can feel the drizzle and see the lights. I'm a teenager again. He's out there skating with her, and my heart is breaking. I turn away to get back on the bus to New Jersey with my friends, refusing to allow myself to cry, and I think in the wisdom of youth, now I know what love feels like.
Love short story. My first love. I was just 13 years old when I fell in love with a boy 4 or 5 years older than me. It was the most ecstatic feeling and I still cannot get over it. As they say, when a woman falls in love, she can never fall in love again, although I was a teenager then, but I still have vivid memories of that boy and how I felt for him. I was a smart, bubbly and a cute little teenager, who enjoyed life and was living life to the fullest, when suddenly life changed for me. I had set my eyes on him the first time when he had come to the Colony Park and he was chatting with his friends. I found him so handsome, his curly, dark brown hair and large dark brown eyes. I was floored. Though now when I look back, I laugh it off as mere infatuation, but I don't know why I felt an instant connection with him. When he looked into my eyes, my heart fluttered and I used to feel so nervous and excited at the same time. You won't believe it, but I never spoke to him. But still I felt a strong connection to him. He was so handsome and so good-looking, that whenever I used to look at him I could not stop myself from staring at him, and he hardly bothered to even turn around and look at me. For him I was insignificant as I was much smaller than him, therefore he hardly even tried to take any interest in me. Each day when I used to go to the park I used to do up my hair differently and wear my best of dresses to look nice lest he spots me there. But every day he used to be so engrossed in chatting and playing with his friends that he hardly took notice of me. I was so mad after him that I used to stand in the balcony for hours on end, just to get a glimpse of him, and sometimes I used to keep peeping out of the window, so that I could see him playing in the park, but I would spot him only a few times. Rest of the times I would just sadly retreat to my studies or doing some other work. As days passed things remained the same when slowly and gradually he started noticing that I stare at him all the time, when I am around him, in the park or in any shop nearby. Once I remember I was standing in the neighborhood bakery and he suddenly walked in with his friends, probably to buy something. I turned around and as usual started staring at him, and he was standing opposite me when suddenly a lot of people came in between us and it was a funny situation and I could see just one half of his face and I caught him staring at me with one eye. I was shocked as it was so sudden and the depth with which he was staring at me cannot be explained in words. There was admiration and tender love in them. I then left the bakery feeling very shy. Until now I cannot forget that look of his in the bakery. Another time I felt very shy was when we both passed each other when I was coming back from school. We were walking on the side of the road and he suddenly saw me walking down the road, swaying my bag along my side. He was chatting with his friend and when I passed him, I stopped swaying my bag and I quietly tried to pass him, and then he turned around and looked fondly at me. I walked away feeling shy and embarrassed at the same time. Anytime I came in direct contact with him and whenever he looked at me I always felt a soft tenderness in his eyes and the warmth of his heart touched me deep inside. This boy was very tall and fair and had the loveliest hair and a very smart moustache, and whenever I looked at him I went weak in my knees. I used to dream of him being near me and talking to me and we spending time with each other, but I could never muster enough courage to ever stand in front of him and talk to him. I was too small and too naive to even think of it. Things went on in this way for a few months and nothing happened till one fine day when he smiled at me. Just imagine, my Prince Charming smiled at me. Finally he took notice of me, and I must tell you, it was the most beautiful smile I had ever seen. I was coming back from school one evening and he was sitting on his bike and waiting for his friend. He saw me coming and when I passed him he did not do anything, but when I went a little further and turned around as I heard some noise behind me and I looked at him, he smiled at me. I was too shocked to respond in any way. I turned around and went to my home. I did not know what to do, but I was mesmerized by his first smile. It was so sudden that I was at a loss of words as to what should my next step be, but fate had other plans for me. Just imagine my bad luck, that when I could think of having a relationship with him, as he had finally acknowledged my presence and smiled at me, I had to go. I had to leave the city for good. My father was transferred to another town and I had to leave the very next day. I had to travel all alone, as my father had arranged for school admissions in that town, and so I had to leave. I could have had a beautiful relationship with this boy whose name also I did not know. I don't know till now whether it was love at first sight with him or was it infatuation. But one thing I must say, and that is, that I will never forget him ever and all that I felt for him. Certainly it was my first love, whether it was infatuation or not I don't know. But it was my first experience of any exposure to the opposite sex, and you won't believe it that I could never like any other person ever in my life after that, other than my husband. First love is like a fresh blooming flower in the morning sunlight. It is like the first most memorable fragrance you might have smelt in your entire life. It is the most wonderful feeling anyone can ever have, and those of you who are reading this story might feel that I am crazy as I am calling my first crush to be my first love. But only I know how I felt when I was around him and when he looked into my eyes. It was the most ultimate feeling I have ever had in my life. It is unforgettable, and I still cherish those tender feelings I had for him. All of those among who have such first loves or crushes as mine will very well understand what I am talking about, and when their love does not reach any culmination, then they will also feel the same way that I am feeling. Whenever I feel very lonely and lost, I think of him and I ask God that why he did not unite me with him. Why am I subjected to such misery of losing my love at such a tender age? Although I am happy in my present life, but when I think of him I cannot console myself. Anyways, those are ways of God, no one can question them, but again I want to reiterate that that was my first love and I will never forget it ever. End.